Good evening. Tonight I'll be talking about essay number 3, the last essay you'll be doing for this class. It's basically very similar to essay number 2, in which you'll be writing about one of the myths of your choice, the last two myths, either one aspect about the myth of race or ethnicity in America or the myth of gender in America. You'll be picking an aspect of one of those two myths and basically writing critically on that, incorporating outside research. We'll talk about that in a minute. Your ideas and also rereading American text, the appropriate rereading American text. There'll be two new things about the essay that differ a little bit from essay number 2. And essay number 3, the one research source you'll be incorporating will be a College of Alameda or database outside scholarly article from the database. It's outside our class, but basically something you find in the database. It's a scholarly article or peer review article. That's what it's called. So it's a little bit more limited than essay number 2, where you would just find a database article. You didn't have to worry if it was scholarly or not. And also, you'll be incorporating one logical fallacy into your essay. Let's talk a little first about scholarly articles. It means just that. There's actually quality or levels of quality of research as you can find. Of course, your most obviously your most material out there is actually your a lot of your unreliable things, right? Things you can find on the internet. When you go into the database, as we learn, it's more filtered, it's more specific, like a little circle in a wide circle, like a little bit more scholarly and more academic and more reliable. But even within that, there's actually quality or levels of research. You have your basic articles that are very reliable in the database, but you also have these scholarly articles or peer review articles in a database in which basically professors or basically high level professionals, respected professionals in the field, write these articles that are peer reviewed by their fellow people in their field. So fellow professors at the universities or other universities would actually maybe 20, 30, 40 other professors would actually review an article written by professor, a book or an article written by professor, and make sure that that article is worthy to be considered something coming from the academic, basic university or college level, coming from that university too, something that university or college can put their stamp on. So obviously very serious, right? So it just can't be any old work that a professor can give opinion and not back up her or his opinions. Is something that the professor must actually write a basic like an article or like an essay type thing where they must add their information that they actually document. They credit their sources. It looks professional. They actually give a summary or abstract of their article. That they actually review the literature in their field. Like the previous work in their field that are verified and academic. They also provide their methodology for their research. Like different fields. Sometimes maybe a sociologist might be doing a piece of research and maybe proposing a conclusion. That sociologist has to discuss her methodology or her ways to make sure it's valid within the field, basically scientifically and valid within academically within that field. So basically, the professor has to follow certain guidelines about citing sources, making sure things are facts when she or he presents things, making sure there's no false things in there. There's footnotes, bibliography. It's well reviewed. It's basically very professional, written for an audience of fellow academics or students, very academic students who want to learn a lot and basically have reliable sources. It's not a popular magazine. Time magazine is really great. Time or Newsweek magazine, articles on the internet, CNN, things like that are actually very valid, right? Because there's actually a lot of facts that those journalists had to review or basically verify the facts in CNN or Time or Newsweek. But those are popular magazines. Those journalists may be A+ students, but they're not really professors or academics in the field. Like they actually may report on what others have written, right? So a journalist is not going to have time to spend years doing research and writing a 20-page article on something in English or sociology or history. That journalist is just going to write on what others have reported about schools, for example, and basically give that article for wide publication. It's a quality article, but it's a popular magazine. So, of course, there's a lot of popular articles out there that are reliable, but they're not really academic or really specific or detailed. So these articles by professors, obviously, they're very, they come very hard or difficult, too, because, the professor's writing a 20-page article, right? You don't want to misrepresent the professor just by reading the first page or a summary of the article. If you don't understand what the professor is saying, that's tough because sometimes the professor is writing in a high level language that's very academic. A lot of stuff you may not know, so it may frustrate you a lot. it may be something difficult to absorb because you have to basically scan, even if you don't really fully read the 20-page article, you have to scan and study the article and make sure it's not misrepresentative. Because if you're going to provide one or two great quotes for the article and discuss that quote in your essay, you have to make sure that it's properly is in proper context and also representative of what that professor said. So basically, you have to do that in your essays, basically. But those articles, academic articles, they can be frustrating, right? They're hard to find. Again, I'm forcing you to go in the database to find this article. So they're difficult to find. They're not as fun to find as Google, for example. They're tough to find. But when you find one, you have to make sure even when you find one, you have to make sure it could relate to what the flow of your essay is or help you improve your essay. But those articles are very good in the sense that they provide detailed information. Yeah, we can all say, oh, the math scores of schools are going down over the years, right? You can find that in Newsweek, right? Students can just say, oh, okay, if the teacher's making me do some research, I can just quote a Newsweek article where journalists just say, stats show that the math scores of American students are going down over the years. But that's basic information. That's something that we all know about. It's something that we've seen before, so we're not going to be wowed when we see the essay. But those articles by professors, those professors spend many years doing these articles. So of course, those articles are they provide very good information new information, even though it's tough to absorb. You have to really comprehend it. It's a struggle. You may not enjoy reading the article, but number one, it's going to improve your reading skills. It's going to improve your analytical skills because you're reading a high level article that you may not be expert in, but you'll learn something, right? And you'll be able to use what the professor says as a springboard for you to critically analyze what the professor says. So you can't let the professor, give a quote that a reader of your essay doesn't understand. You have to explain that quote to the reader, interpret that quote, analyze that quote, synthesize that quote, break down that quote, do all the critical skills, writing skills to really critically comment on that skill. Don't let the professor do your essay for you or let the research do your essay for you. I've been harping on in terms of doing research essays. So those scholarly articles, they're tougher, but again, they're not that difficult to find. They have different characteristics, as you see by the handout I gave to you in Essay 3 about how to tell the difference between a scholarly article and a peer-reviewed article. You can take a look at that, and I went over some of the differences. Obviously, those scholarly articles are a lot more high level. They don't have fancy or funny pictures there. It's written for an academic audience. It's written by professors and scholars, and it's basically geared towards the academic community rather than your popular articles or your basic internet articles that are not as high level. But those articles are tough to find. But as you go into the database, I also include a little handout that shows before you do your search, you can limit your search results by clicking that you only want scholarly or peer-reviewed articles. You just do a little checkbox and then before your search. And then when you search, your results will turn up scholarly articles. And a lot of you have already been getting scholarly articles in your essay number 1 because, as we can see, most or a significant proportion of the articles in your databases are scholarly because it is, the databases are geared towards the academic community. So those are really good articles to have. So that's why I want to have you do a scholarly article, but then don't be intimidated because scholarly articles, many of you have already been finding scholarly articles in your essays. Okay, the next thing is logical fallacies. There's also a handout on logical fallacies. Basically, when someone argues a point, whether it's your friend, yourself, or other people, you want to make sure that your argument is basically logical, which is clear. If you're a Star Trek fan, logical means, acting clear. Your mind is flowing in a clear, reasonable, organized way that the reader can trust your mind process. Logical means basically clear, reasonable, and coherent, and something that can convince a reader because basically your thought process are, step 1, step 2, step 3, like you're basically moving in a coherent way that follows the rules of logic and order in your thinking. If you have an error in thinking, those are called logical fallacies. Like fallacies means errors, right? Errors in thinking. And I go over some of those errors in thinking in the handout. There's a handout that I gave you that you can read about the different errors in thinking. But some of the common errors in thinking, you can also apply this to your life. Do you do these errors in thinking? Do your opponents do this? Does the current president, Donald Trump, have these errors in thinking? Do fellow students have these errors in thinking? Does the people in social media, when they make posts, have these errors in thinking? So think about these typical common errors in thinking here, which I'll go over quickly. You can beg the question, that's the error in thinking, is basically assuming an argument is true before it really has been proven true or not. You could say, if we are to improve our failing schools, we must do this. However, if you really take a look at the argument, it's very poor in the beginning because how did you prove already that the schools were failing? You're basically trying to jam an assumption into the reader's mind or a person's mind and move on quickly, right, to get the reader to agree to something that has not been proven yet. So that's called begging the question fallacy. There's another fallacy called non sequitur, does not follow, because you're basically making a conclusion based on evidence that does not follow. That's called the non sequitur. Okay, red herring is another fallacy where you can basically introduce irrelevant issues to distract your reader. Okay, you can actually say, oh, but what about this, right? So say you have a weak argument, you want to distract your reader by pointing out something different, right? I'm really late to the meeting, but what happened there? What happened out in the freeway, right? You're kind of distracting your audience from a right issue. There's also called false authority, where you appeal to false authorities, like you're appealing to a pro athlete to pitch a product where the pro athlete's not really an expert on the product, for example. So it's called appealing to false authority. You can also appeal to the reader's fear or pity. Those are also fallacies in thinking. You can also appeal to the reader's snob appeal. Oh, the Lexus car is actually for drivers of great taste, where they actually really did not discuss the merits of that particular Lexus model that they're trying to prove. Okay, there's also something called bandwagon, where you just jump on the bandwagon. Well, everyone believes that politician, so let's all jump on the bandwagon. So that's also another error in thinking, right? It's not really logical, clear, or orderly thinking that's really going to convince the reader otherwise of your thoughts. There's also something called argument ad populum, like trying to appeal to the popularity of something to argue about. Saying, they want to appeal to things like freedom or democracy or things like that. But that's not really valid unless the reader really proves that point too. There's also something called argument ad hominem. That's also a fallacy too, where you're attacking the person instead of the issue. So say a politician might give a good view on the issue, but maybe the politician was cheating on his wife. So you might say, well, the politician's cheating on his wife, so we shouldn't really believe that politician. Well, the politician may not be a good character in his personal life, but maybe the politician does give a good argument about some other issue, right? So that's called argument ad hominem. There's also a lot of major fallacies that we are kind of aware of already, like a lot of oversimplifications of arguments. Things like sweeping generalization, where you're making a conclusion based on examples of a few. It's called hasty generalization, where you're trying to generalize a conclusion just based on one or two examples or not enough examples. So we're really familiar with that. That's also stereotyping is another form of that. We're actually trying to stereotype races or people just based on one or two people. Well, that person is really dumb. So that means brunette people are really dumb, right? If I only saw one or two people who are brown hair that are really dumb. So now I'm saying all brunette or brown hair people are dumb. That's called hazy generalization. There's also something called reductive fallacy, where we're actually trying to reduce the complexity of an argument. That's also really bad. Like you're actually just trying to cut down a really complex argument to make it really simple. And that's very dangerous too, right? We all want to save time, but we can't really reduce an argument to such that it's so simple that it's basically a farce. There's also something called post hoc fallacy, where you say A since A preceded B, that means A caused B, right? All right. Since this happened before B, like since event A happened before B, that A caused event B. So that's not necessarily true, right? In our complex world, there's something called either or fallacy, where we say either you study or fail this class. However, in real life, we know that's not just a case that you study or you're going to fail the class, right? There's a lot of in-betweens or other options, right? Where you maybe partly study or maybe you absorb the material better. In a classroom, you don't really need to study much. So sometimes teachers say that, oh, you either study or fail, or either study or fail in life, right? But that's not really true in life too. And there's something called false analogy, where we try to use analogies to explain things, but the analogies are not really valid. Take this analogy. I'm saying, well, just like the lioness, the lion mother protects her cubs, we must also shoot criminals who invade our house and protect our families, right? But that's a fallacy. It's pretty convincing, right? Like a person or a mother or father just needs to protect their kids. So just like how a lion mother or father protects his or her cubs. However, that's not really true, because a lion, so therefore we must kill or shoot the burglar who comes in our house. But that's not really true, right? Because lions are animals, right? But we're human beings. The only option is not to shoot the burglar who comes in our house. Maybe the option is to basically call the police or call 911. We shouldn't just shoot any burglar that comes in our house. That's kind of an extreme example, but it shows that you got to be careful when you use analogies, because we kind of think of in analogies or metaphors like false metaphors or false analogies, but we're just human. A lot of us think about analogies to understand things. We actually kind of say like, like there's a ton of money, right? Or basically, it's a ton of money to buy this house, right? We're not really using a ton of money, right? But we're kind of using like weights, like different types of analogies or metaphors. Like he's a pig, right? Or he's a pig, right? We're kind of like equating a man as a pig, right? That's like a metaphor, right? But it's not really a true, like the analogies or metaphor may not be true. It's something that can help the reader understand or help us understand the world. But we got to be careful with analogies or metaphors, especially if they're false. Like we can use them, but we also have to be careful with them, right? So we all do. We all use logical fallacies, even rereading American authors. Danticott, right? Jeanette Wall, right? A lot of those, Rex Walls. A lot of them, a lot of smart people, professional authors, actually still talking fallacies. The key, President Trump, President Biden, right? Soon to be President Biden. Like a lot of these presidents, they do use fallacies. We got to be able to recognize that in our opponents. And these are just some of the fallacies, right? Some of the fallacies are errors in thinking, but we got to recognize them. Like before someone can bully you into going along with the issue, they may just say, "Yeah, I agree to this," but then you have to look at the way the person thinks. Is their thinking logical and valid? Do they have any fallacies? And then critically, we need to slow things down, right? In our world, we're very fast and efficient. We need to slow down. What is President Trump really saying? Let's analyze what he's really saying. What is that Democrat really saying? We have to really analyze what they're saying. And is it really true? Are they in a clear and organized way, or are they basically giving fallacies? So you need in your essay to point out a logical fallacy. Like as you prove your point, you might be pointing out error by other authors who disagree with you, or maybe even your author you agree with. You might say that author has an error in thinking. Like maybe Danticott does give a logical fallacies, yet Danticott is still overall her argument is still good. Right. So again, logical fallacies are not deal breakers, but you got to be careful because, people use them all the time, but we have to be able to recognize them and critically kind of see where that puts an argument. Does it really kill the argument, or does it make just a minor little fallacy that the author gives? So you do want to need to kind of directly point, like you would say, Danticott gives the fallacy of hasty generalization, which she says this. However, her other arguments are valid, so we still need to consider her points. You might mention that, or you might say opponents of me might say this about ethnicity or race, or racists might say this, and this is a logical fallacy of stereotyping or hasty generalization. So you do want to point out that essay just one time, and that'll be for essay number 3. But I just wanted to get you familiar with logical fallacies, like how errors in thinking, because that's part of critical thinking, being able to see, being able to avoid logical fallacies by yourself, and be able to recognize that in others and critically analyze and think about that. So that's all for tonight, and good luck as you continue your essay number 3. Bye.